Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. I'm Mark Stein, Thrive founder and your podcast host. We're creating sustainable, inclusive, and multi-generational residential communities from repurposed big box stores or other unused buildings. By offering unique and ecological co-living options, our aim is to combat the epidemic of isolation, revitalize communities, and help others discover the many benefits of engaged community living. In this podcast series, join us as we discuss co-living and other aspects of our concept, in addition to bringing you interesting people who are doing cool things from around the world. Through this podcast, learn more about our concept and see how Thrive co-living communities will bring together people from all walks of life. To find more about us, visit www.thrivecolivingcommunities.org. Thanks for watching and enjoy the podcast. Okay, so hi everybody and welcome back to the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. Always a mouthful. I'm happy to welcome Rob Dietz from the Post-Carbon Institute, and we'll let him give a good description here in a moment, but obviously a lot of overlap in our interest with sustainability and energy efficiency. So I'm really happy to have Rob on the podcast, and we'll give a lot of resources along the way, and for sure his website, they have a podcast, so we'll definitely connect you with more from them. Rob, thanks so much for being with me today.
Oh, it's great to be here, Mark. I really appreciate the invitation.
So you guys have been at it for quite a while. I think you're a fairly recent executive director. Talk a little bit about your role, your background, and the Post-Carbon Institute.
So the Post-Carbon Institute is a nonprofit organization that was founded in 2003. I came on as the program director about 4 or 5 years ago, and love my job. What we're all about is the transition from a fossil fueled economy to a renewable energy economy. But we're not in this space of all you have to do is throw some solar panels and wind turbines out there and keep on doing the same things that we've been doing. We've got to have a very big change in the way society operates, the way our economy operates. You could almost say the Post-Carbon Institute is a limits to growth shop. Like, we understand that you can't have a infinitely growing economy on a finite planet. And so our mission is really all about giving people the information that they need to make good decisions as the E4 crises come down on us. And by E4, I'm talking about energy, the environment, the economy, and equity. So, we can unpack that as much or as little as you want, but, we've got some structural problems with the way we are operating the economy in the US and really most of the countries around the world. And obviously, we've got to get to a sustainable setup where we're not causing climate change, where we're not breaking down ecosystems and causing the extinctions of the other species that share this planet with us, and where people have chances to meet their needs without undermining the life support systems of the planet. So that's what we're about, trying to get that kind of information to folks. Sometimes it can get a little heady, a little, we can delve into some doomy kind of topics, but we also try to have fun with it and work on how can we build resilient communities. So that's where we get a lot of overlap with the kind of work that you do, Mark.
And I saw an online course that you offer, and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the course is called Think Resilience, and it's hosted by our senior fellow, Richard Heinberg, who, if your listeners are not aware of Richard's work, he's the author of 14 books. Most recently, this one, which we can talk about more, which is Power, Limits and Prospects for Human Survival, where he really delves into the philosophy there. around power and how we use and abuse it. But his course, Think Resilience, it's fantastic. It's about 4 hours long and really gives you a deep dive into how humanity got into this predicament that we're in, what things need to change, and some ideas for where we can go to build more resilient communities. And it's free, so I highly recommend, if you go over to resilience.org or to postcarbon.org, you can find a link to the course and sign up, and you'll be speaking our language by the time you get to the end of it.
So good, and we'll mention that in the show notes, as well as many other things. So speaking of excuse me, and I apologize to the audience. I've got a sore throat, hopefully not COVID. I don't feel terrible, so hopefully not. But about overconsumption and unlimited economic growth, one of the main problem we're trying to solve with Thrive communities is this epidemic of loneliness that people have encountered far before COVID hit. And I bring this up because as I'm looking at a lot of the apartment units that are going up everywhere, I see it everywhere I go, huge 4-story buildings, thousands of units. It appears to me that it's a really lonely existence. There may be a workout room, there may be a pool, perhaps a community room, but my sense is that they're mostly empty, and that people go into their unit, watch their own big screen TV. It's got to be extremely lonely, maybe meet a neighbor on either side. And I think that that's the way, at least the economic drivers of our society want things to be, for us to feel isolated, because what are we going to do? We're going to spend, we're going to consume. We certainly aren't going to share resources with people in a unit like that. Yeah. So we're really working to break down this epidemic of loneliness, bring people together, and offer this sense of community and fulfillment, so that we're not so compelled to consume. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, I think you're certainly right that the way we've structured our living arrangements and the way the economy is built, that it does tend to push us into these places that certainly are not set up to build that local community and build neighborliness. I'm not sure it was ever done on purpose. I think, what's happened is you've had an erosion of services in the economy that used to be provided by the community. And now, instead, for people to feel secure, it's like you have to have a bunch of money so that you can pay for those services. And a big side effect of that is like you're saying, the loneliness, the lack of that social contact, lack of working together with your neighbors, and taking care of one another, and the lack of sort of sharing. Everybody's got a garage full of tools that they use, maybe once a year. Whereas if you had a little shed in your neighborhood, and everybody was using them, they would get used a lot more often, and you'd use a lot fewer resources. So, I think basically the economy's gone way too far towards this drive, for the companies to sell everything that they can, no matter whether it's really needed or not. The goal is profit maximization. So you have to generate as much revenue as you can. And on the consumer side, we're constantly driven, as I said, to use purchases to sort of meet our needs for security and And it doesn't take too long to realize that that's a shallow way to meet most of your needs. And it doesn't work towards building long-term satisfaction. And there's really there's no idea that you should stop, that you have enough at some point. In fact, I ended up writing a whole book on this topic a while back called Enough is Enough. And the subtitle is Building a Sustainable Economy in a World of Finite Resources. And that's a part of it, is how do you have a sharing economy at the local scale that doesn't grow so big that it's stretching the resources that we want to have around for all the future generations that we want to have a chance to experience those things. So yeah, I think you're exactly right. Part of the story of us making it to a sustainable society, it's got to be realizing, how do we build community ties back into where we have meaningful relationships, and how do we produce and consume at a scale that can meet our needs and not cause the kinds of problems that you see today. I mean, right now we're depleting fossil fuels at a rate that, at some point you're going to run out of them. We are also, of course, the side effect there is causing climate change. And if you pay attention to any climate scientists, it's one of the most frantic groups of people out there with the warnings and the danger level that we face. I used to work in conservation biology. They might be the only group of people, the conservation biologists, who are more frantic than the climate scientists, because of how our economy is eating into the biosphere, and we're causing extinctions left and right. So, we've got to get to this place where we address those things. And the beauty is, if you can scale down to the community level and find an economy that fits, you're addressing so many different problems across the board. And it's going to take a lot of change, a lot of wisdom, different infrastructure, all kinds of things to get there. It's going to take some shared sacrifice, and that, changes are not easy, and we might give up some things that are, I don't know, maybe comfortable for us now, but long term, the benefits of doing it could be astounding, especially I think with the kinds of things you're talking about, Mark, with community ties, friendships, neighborhoods that really feel like home and really work, rather than being locked in, say your own McMansion, streaming videos all day, and, not having the richness, those interactions, the things that really make life meaningful.
Right. And we're, one of the features of our model is to have a tool share co-op where people can gather all of those leaf blowers, and, how many carpet shampooers does a community of 30 people need? How often do you use
30,
that?
Right?
So to be able to share those, in a recent podcast with another co-living advocate, we were talking about the possibility that this whole field of co-living is growing exponentially. Not so much here in the States, although it's mostly on both coasts here in the US, but Europe, Africa. I'm in an international organization of co-living called colive.org, and there's something going on in the Nordics and Africa. So it's really growing tremendously. And I think that COVID certainly is sensitizing people to the need for community, even people that didn't value it that much. But to bring it to global warming, one of the things that we were talking about is that one possibility for this exponential growth in interest in co-living is the sense that we are at a precipice point with global warming, and you're more painfully aware of it than we are. But and the thought was that it may be this sense of potential extinction that is leading people, a certain group of us, to say we really need to go back to some fundamentals, have multiple generations together and learning from each other and building those emotionally supportive relationships before it's too late. And if it is too late, and I do want to talk about that, because what I read, a fair amount of what I read from the science is that it's too late, that no matter how much we do, it's not going to be enough to prevent this catastrophe. But maybe efforts like ours, with groups of 50 people, 75 people, 50 units, maybe all that we can do is to hug each other and be together and support each other in the time that we have left. So
yeah, well, a lot to unpack there. I mean, I lived about a dozen years in a co-housing community, so it's an intentional neighborhood with sustainability values as part of the agreement to live there, trying to live a somewhat powered down lifestyle. And we had about 35 houses on the property and 70 plus residents. And yeah, I mean, like, even going back to where you started, the sharing of tools, I loved it for that aspect, that where, I have a wrench and a hammer, and, after a while it's hard to screw in a screw with a wrench, so I could go into that workshop and it was wonderful. And it's not just having tools. So it's having a neighbor who actually is a true craftsman, knows how to use the tools, will take the time because they want you to know how to use them and turn into a craftsperson as well. Like, unbelievable access and an opportunity for creativity. In my own case, I got really into making cigar box guitars, sort of trying to build a guitar out of, a few boards and a cigar box. And it was so much fun and a real creative outlet that was, not just about the use of the tools and the building of the thing, but then afterwards a musical creative outlet too. And all that's part of a community building possibility. So yeah, I mean, you can start thinking really small, like, hey, let's share some tools. And then you can see how that might sort of blossom into something much bigger and more important, really. The next piece really is this idea of weathering storms together. I have a really close friend of mine, Jason Bradford, who is a farmer. And he and I have worked on a lot of projects. Most recently, he and I co-host, along with Asher Miller, the Crazy Town podcast, which is sort of our take on what's happening in the world and why. And we're pretty irreverent, so I don't know if it's for all tastes, but we have a lot of fun with that. Anyway, Jason on the farm, he's talked about, he could almost make his life like a fortress, right? He's got the farmland. He could build the bunker and put up food, but if his neighbor is going hungry, or if many of his neighbors are going hungry, what kind of security does he actually have? It's not very hard to go take something away from somebody who's thriving when nobody else is. So the whole notion of, even the logic behind kind of like this, let's get our own little kingdom and protect it, it doesn't really make any sense. Where people have security is is with one another. And it's not just security, right? It's meaningfulness, it's fulfillment. We are social creatures. I'm not saying that you never have alone time or anything like that, but it's clear that we're meant to live in families and in multi-generation and with one another. So to me, it's a really important way of trying to build in resilience into your life, is having that strong social network. Having people that you can rely on when you need it, being able to provide service to others as, basically a way of life. What can I do for my community today? That's kind of the surest means towards building a not just a resilient community, one that can face all the shocks that are coming, but also one that's just genuinely healthier and more fun, and has a way better shot at achieving the sustainability goals that we have.
So let's take advantage of your expertise on the science of global warming and climate change. Are we too late? Is there a way? And where does someone like Tesla fall into this? And I know that Tesla is controversial in some environmental circles, but I'd be curious to hear your view on that. With tackling transportation, which is, my understanding is that transportation is 25% of the world's energy use. They also have developed a heat exchanger, what am I trying to say? An HVAC system with the Model 3 that eventually they plan to build out, that's much more efficient than current HVAC. And that's 40% of the world's energy is heating and cooling. So they seem to be biting off as big of a piece of this. Now, they're not working on HVAC at the moment, it's transportation, but trucking and automobiles. I'm curious to see where they fit into this. Are they part of the problem, in your view, of trying to grow our way out of this? Or are they part of the solution to reduce carbon emissions and that sort of thing? So I know I'm asking multiple questions each time, but
that's okay. I hopefully I can keep it straight and just get you the ideas that you're looking for, and spurs further conversation. Your starting point, are we too late? I guess I don't think I would frame it quite like that, because the interpretation is pretty rough. Like, too late, what? The planet's going to die, people are going to die, civilization's going to end. Like, when climate scientists say we're too late, what they're saying is we're too late to prevent warming of a level that's going to hurt. So all of the energy that we've burned, the fossil fuels that we've ignited, the methane we've released, like, all of that is in the atmosphere, and some global heating is baked in, and we're going to feel the effects. There's going to be some sea level rise. There's going to be worse forest fires there. I'm here in the Pacific Northwest. I never thought what happened a year ago, temperature wise, could happen. We had the heat dome effect. Nobody had ever really heard of that term, heat dome, but in a place where air conditioners are rare, and suddenly you have 120-degree days back to back, it was pretty frightening. In the previous year, we had intense smoke where our air quality became the worst in the world from forest fires in the surrounding lands, and that kind of thing. It's too late to prevent things like that from happening. The question is, it's not too late, though, for us to prevent it from getting far, far worse than that. There's a big difference between 2 degrees of warming and 4 degrees of warming. I think we still have to feel this sense of urgency that we need to do something. It's not, let's not treat this like it's end times and party down as hard as you can until we drive the car off of the cliff. I mean, that's not what we're looking for. So what we're looking for is equitable way of running our lives and our economy such that we get our needs met and don't pummel the hell out of our one and only home as we're doing it. And kind of getting to your second point about technology, I'm not a Luddite by any stretch. I mean, I'm sitting here talking to you over a laptop with technology that wasn't available 10 or 15 years ago. I find that absolutely amazing. And you can see it's connecting us, right? Like I feel, you and I would not have had this conversation. Your listeners would not have had access to it. So technology can do some really useful things for us. And same with the changing up of our sources of energy and how our transportation systems work, how our heating, venting, and cooling systems work. These things can be improved with better technology. The problem, though, if you want to go the technical end, there's something called the Jevons paradox or the rebound effect, where oftentimes when you make a process more efficient, we actually use more resources rather than less. You would kind of think, okay, I have a car, I make it more efficient, better gas mileage, for example. You would think, oh, I'm going to use less gas. Well, what ends up happening is we end up using more because oftentimes the greater efficiency leads to lower cost. So you can use more of it, not worry about the expenses that you incur. Or you can find more uses for it, like lighting became much more efficient over time. You went from having to burn methane or natural gas essentially to now you have these LED lights that are super efficient. And because of that, you can light up anything, anytime, anywhere for almost no cost. So you end up, because you expand so much the amount of lighting, you actually end up using more electricity. So, there's that issue. And I think we basically need to combine the idea of, yes, let's keep working on innovation and better technologies, but combine that with let's also manage ourselves and get to a sustainable scale. So, you've mentioned Tesla. A company like Tesla is really about, hey, we want to sell as many vehicles, as many batteries, as many, whatever systems they're working on as possible. And, it's great if an electric car is probably better than an internal combustion car, but at the same time, maybe there's an entirely better transportation solution than, one person driving one, 5,000-pound vehicle around. I've often thought, I don't know who came up with the quote or the idea, but like to be going to the store to pick up a few groceries and you got to take thousands of pounds of steel and rubber and plastic in order to do that, just doesn't make a lot of sense. So, Tesla's goal of becoming a behemoth company and having these outsized profits probably isn't compatible with the future we need. And I mean, you can even see, where has Elon Musk gone with all that wealth? Well, now he's trying to colonize Mars. And that always strikes me as really odd. Like if we're having trouble dealing with the the biosphere and managing it properly on this planet where we're evolved to live. We can breathe the air. Gravity is we're totally set up to thrive in this place. Why do we think we're going to go to this, this other planet that doesn't provide what we need for survival, and we're going to engineer that into something, and somehow we're going to do better at that than we're doing here? It's really strange thinking from somebody who's purportedly very smart. So I don't I don't sit here and try to say that a company like Tesla has zero role. I mean, I think the engineers there are, they're really trying to do something that's important. At the same time, if we don't wrap our collective heads around getting to that sustainable scale, it doesn't matter. You can't have infinitely growing numbers of electric cars either. So I think there's, it's like everything. There's always nuance and complexity. You don't just throw some technology at the problem and solve it. You really have to think about what is our behavior and how are we going to act wisely and not just cleverly. It's the engineering that we are capable of, so much cleverness, and it's really, I mean, I get super impressed by it. I mean, the fact that we have these, little gadgets, these smartphones, that the things you can look up and do with them is, it's pretty stunning, and they're pretty reliable, unless you accidentally drop them down the cliff. But they,
I've done that.
Yeah. Well, and they, but we shouldn't just stop with, hey, look how clever and awesome this thing is. If we're undermining the life support systems of the planet while getting there, we shouldn't be distracted by the smart inventions we can make. And it's something that we really need to wrestle with and take a long, hard look at, and get the scale of our economy and the scale of our societies in line with what the planet can handle.
Mm-hmm. And to your point about the next step with automobiles is not fewer of them, according to Elon, because it's going to drive down the cost of riding in a vehicle. So, and that's why he's proposing the Boring Company tunnels, because in the short run, traffic is going to get worse because there are going to be more people. It's going to be as efficient, as cost effective as riding the bus and other mass transit options. So people will, in the short run, will do that. Now, also, he's saying that a car will be have 5 times more usability. So the next step there is a robo-taxi network. Obviously, I spend a lot of time researching this, so that car ownership will plummet and people will just do ride sharing, like Uber without a driver, and it'll drive the cost down. But I think he agrees with you to a certain point, although their main mission seems to be to speed up the use of sustainable energy sources and move from gas-powered automobiles to electric automobiles and trucks. Let's talk, can
I make a comment about his vision of the future? That it's all based on having access to cheap and abundant energy. You're not going to tunnel through the earth and build, unbelievably complex networks of underground tunnels and then maintain those tunnels unless you've got an unbelievable supply of energy. And we've gotten into the state that we're in with our infrastructure and the number of people that we have and the amount of consumption that we do because of the gift of fossil fuels. I mean, hardly anybody recognizes just how dense of an energy source we were able to find by doing a little digging into the Earth's crust. I mean, just go try to push your car for a mile or so and see just how energy dense that teaspoon of gasoline is, as compared to the human muscle that it takes to do that. And so, if Elon Musk thinks we're going to have, rocket ships to Mars and 1 billion electric cars, or maybe 2 billion or 3 billion, I don't know what the vision is, and tunnels all around for those cars to self-drive, and all the computer network that is going to be running nonstop to make that happen. What's the energy source? Because it isn't solar panels, I'll tell you that much. You're gonna, I don't think I'll get the numbers right on this, but on our podcast, Crazy Town, we've interviewed astrophysicist Tom Murphy, who's done an outstanding job of looking into the capabilities of our energy sources. And if you are going to keep increasing the supply of energy and you want to do it with solar panels, it's only a short amount of time, especially from any kind of lengthy historical view, before you'd have to coat the entire planet in solar panels. There's also the issue of heat. If you keep increasing the amount of energy you're using, you will increase the amount of heat here on Earth. It even takes it to the absurd level. After a few thousand years or something, the Earth would end up as hot as the sun if you keep growing our energy use exponentially the way that we have been. And it doesn't matter what your source of energy is. It's just a fact of physics. So at some point, your use of energy has to stop growing and subside, and it has to be kept at a level that's commensurate with what the planet can support. One of Elon Musk's compatriots, Jeff Bezos, another billionaire, tech worshipping, space cowboy wannabe, he gave a huge presentation on the predicament that we're in with energy. And this was kind of the launch of his space exploration company where he was doing this. And his whole thing was, hey, fossil fuels have given us all the gifts, and we're at a point now where we can't burn them anymore, and we're at a point where we're actually messing with Earth's ecosystems. It almost sounded like a presentation that we would give at the Post-Carbon Institute. And where we differed wildly was the turn. Our turn was, hey, that was fun burning all those fossil fuels. Now let's think of how to structure society differently. His turn was, so we better colonize the moon so that we can cut that up and use its resources so that we can colonize other planets. And, I like science fiction. I like the wonder and imagination that comes with space exploration. Do I want to bet on that as our survival mechanism if we can't figure out how to survive on this planet? No, not at all. So I think these billionaire space exploring types, they are counting on a continuous supply of cheap and abundant energy, and you don't have to spend all that long thinking about, well, where is that coming from before you can knock a few holes in their plans.
Mm-hmm. And our plan to set up relatively small communities, 50 units, 75 people, living close to each other, living close to the land. It's, in a way, it's modest, and maybe too modest, although we feel like there are enough people. There's certainly not a huge percentage of people that want to live this way, but we feel like there are enough people in each community that if we spur interest with a good, solid model and options that give some flexibility to people in terms of how they live, how much community, how much alone time and privacy time, that it can appeal to enough people to influence. I have a friend who's a very quiet vegetarian vegan, and there are some that, especially a new vegan, and I was sharing this with her. I know I'm getting pretty far afield, but bear with me here. I was sharing with her that there's nothing meaner to human beings than a new fledgling vegan. They're compassionate to every animal except humans. And I was that way at one point too. But so we can't be too rabid about this model, but just offering it up. And she, in fact, offers her vegetarianism and the ethics behind it very quietly and not in a harsh way. So I don't know, but do you think that small decentralized efforts like this are enough to move the needle and move enough people towards a more sane future? What are your thoughts about efforts like ours?
Well, I really like your idea of, hey, let's set up a model. Let's try something, see how it works, and it has the potential to catch on. So, it's possible for us to change our culture and our behavior relatively quickly. It's a lot harder. We're not going to change our genetic makeup overnight. I mean, unless the CRISPR guys fan out and start doing some crazy experiments on us. But no, you can, though, change, people's concept of how should I live, and how should I live through challenging times. I mean, we're recording this early on in the conflict where Russia has invaded the Ukraine. I think Ukrainians are probably contemplating all kinds of things right now about ways to weather the current storm and how should we live? How do we go about meeting our daily needs? Things can happen extremely fast. I mean, I often think about, nobody wants to live through disasters, but when they happen, when you're part of that scene, it can be some of the most connecting time of your life because of the amount of assistance and aid that we provide to one another, the meaningfulness of that work. Setting up a community in the way that you're talking about, where you get a group of people and they sort of are having an intention around building a sustainable, equitable, fun, whatever the purposes behind the community are, that it develops that same kind of camaraderie, that community building spirit. I don't want to, sort of idealize it or turn it into a utopia, because there are plenty of problems as well. When you have a community like that, you really need to focus on what kind of communication are we doing with each other? How much bureaucracy and administrivia is necessary behind the scenes? What things are in the public sphere? What decisions are individual and what rise up to the level of, well, that has to be agreed on by the whole community and some sort of consensus process or something. So, I mean, there are tricky things, and especially in the United States of America, where private freedoms and making, your own choice is sort of baked into our culture at this point in a pretty heavy-handed way. So, like having to make a decision as a community could be seen by some as, hey, you're trampling on my personal freedoms, and even to some extent, you could see that as being true. At the same time, I do see it, you asked how much might this idea of building these smaller, energy efficient, less consumptive, and more friendly communities move the needle toward the sort of society that we need. Could move it a lot. I mean, it all depends on the model and how receptive to it people are. It also depends on what crises we face. If we really get to the point where no more fossil fuels can be burned, and I think we're at that point. So that really means powering down, and that means we've got to rework our infrastructure. We've got to rethink how we're moving food around in the economy. We've got to rethink so many different things. And one of the ways to work through that transition period is to be in good, close relationships with the people in your community and working together to solve the problems that will invariably arise with any kind of, great transition like that. So, I think it has a chance to move the needle quite a bit. The other nice thing about it is, as you've said, it's a model. So you develop a community and you see, oh, well, in this case, in this particular place, this thing that we tried, this part of it didn't work that well. Well, let's try something different over here, or in the community that we're in. Let's move things in a little bit different direction. I mean, it's not like you drop a community down and it's set in stone how it operates. It has the chance to evolve and to do what you would maybe call some adaptive management. Pay attention to what's working and do more of that. Pay attention to what's not working and do less of that. Fairly simple.
And I think this is the first time this term has come up. I think the term permaculture and everything associated with that can be really impactful in a community like this. In fact, using permaculture principles, I envision that we will not pre-plan this community and then have people come and join it, but get a group of people together and spend some time on the site and build it and come up with the concept and the organizing structures all together, which is a real basis, as I understand it, of permaculture is making sure that you're site specific.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, permaculture is really all about understanding that, at least my understanding, the first step is, what does nature provide in this place? And how can I be part of that, embedded in it and working with it, rather than what we've tended to do, which is, hey, let's just drop a house and a bunch of pavement in this place and hope it all works out because we've got cheap energy to deal with it. So, instead of, this can get into architecture, but, we used to be way smarter about building structures that would take advantage of the sun. And, you would angle your houses and set up your trees and plants to help keep the place comfortable and livable year round. And now building codes typically don't include anything on that front. And so we're not looking at what does the land provide, what aspect do we need for heating and cooling, what those kinds of questions have been left out. So I think permaculture, those kinds of principles should be part of all of our community development. I've been constantly amazed at, you get new houses that get built in, relatively what's considered progressive places like Portland, Oregon, they're just conventional houses. They're still installing gas furnaces instead of a heat pump, for example. There's nothing about trying to do small solar co-ops and making sure that roofs have a south-facing aspect and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I would love if we had a lot more of that planning that you're talking about. I know with our co-housing community, things were planned to a very meticulous level to try to maximize energy efficiency, to try to work with the landscape. And it was quite frankly, it was a long and difficult process. It was a 7-year formation process before, a foundation was actually set down and a building started to go up. So you kind of got to like buckle up and enjoy the ride along the way. And you'll find out probably some things about how to communicate while you're trying to plan a community and make decisions and try to avoid decision-making fatigue.
Yeah. Well, as we're starting to wrap up here, I want to give you a chance to talk about any other aspects of your message and your work that we didn't cover. I know we kept going back to co-living and community, although community is a big part of what I hear your message being. But share any other information, messages. What else should we know from your perspective?
Yeah, well, something that's been on my mind a lot. It actually comes out of the work we're doing with our podcast, Crazy Town, where when we hear from audience members, where it becomes clear that there are a lot of people out there who, they're sort of checking the weather. I guess I'm using that metaphorically, but like realizing something just isn't right with how the world is working. We've got climate change as the thing that's pushing a lot of people into sort of this panic state and wondering like, well, what the hell are we doing here? And one of the things that we get with Crazy Town, and you could also see this on resilience.org, that people are looking for community, even just to discuss these things, to feel like they're not alone and crazy out there, because most people are just going about doing, what you're supposed to do in this, being a good citizen in this economy means, finding a job that pays a lot and buying a lot of stuff with that job and, with the money that you get from that job. And most people realize that, there's something bigger, something more. I think to some extent, we're always on a journey for meaning. And I do think that working on these problems, how do we get a more local economy? What can I do in my community? What are things I can, start with in my own life, my own household, that will help build the kind of resilience and the kind of sustainability that we so desperately need. And it's like once you start kicking the tires on those kinds of ideas, pretty soon you find you're doing activist kinds of things. You become more of a leader in your community and start to see some real changes. And I think that's what we need. We need people out there who are willing to take some risks, willing to try things, to build models, willing to speak up when it needs to happen, and are willing to just do things in their community to take care of one another and to take care of the one and only place that we'll ever know as home.
Nice. Well, I really appreciate having this conversation. We went in a lot of different directions, all tied to the theme. but I see a lot of mutuality in our organization's purposes. So I hope we can stay connected and certainly promote what you're doing, and hopefully you can help spread the word of our approach, and keep the conversation going.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Mark. If you have articles and essays that you all produce, we could talk about getting them out on resilience.org, where our editors do an awesome job of spreading ideas that that are, it can range from the simple to the world changing. But really appreciate being on your podcast, and best of luck in your endeavors.
Yeah, and before we finally wrap up, give us some websites, ways that we can contact you. Give us the different websites that you guys manage, and any other books and resources that you'd like my audience to see. Yeah,
definitely. You can go to postcarbon.org. Resilience.org is our, as I said, our place for articles. That we produce about 5 or 6 each day. I actually subscribe to the Daily Digest. It'll send you an email with summaries of that day's articles. Really fantastic resource. Can't say enough about that. I learned so much. We've got a lot of books and reports and ideas floating around. You mentioned earlier the Think Resilience course.
You've got 2 podcasts.
2 podcasts, right? Crazy Town haven't mentioned yet What Could Possibly Go Right. Fantastic interview series with Vicki Robin, who is on our board, and she gets some amazing guests. Most recently, I think she had Paul Hawken, who's pretty famous in sustainability circles, with numerous books that he's written over the years. For a small organization, we really put out a lot of material and work really hard to basically get to those places that a lot of other environmental leaning organizations won't go. We're very much about telling the truth, even sometimes if it's painful, but then working on things at the community scale and ideas for building resilience that can be shared. And there's just a ton of information there, and ways that that your listeners can find something that sort of meets them where they are. Like, okay, I like that idea. Let me see if there's something I can do with that. From, like I said, something that can be really small, something in your own life, a behavior change, an energy use change, to bigger things, where you're talking about how do I lead my community through a resilience building process. So I definitely explore those websites, and there's tons of good stuff there.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Let me thank our listeners and viewers on YouTube. You can find us on YouTube, as well as all of your favorite podcast stations. I wore my t-shirt today to remind me to share our merch store. We've got all sorts of things with the Thrive logo on it, so feel free to check that out. In the show notes as well, we give different ways that you can support us on Patreon. Speaking of the devil, Amazon, with Amazon Smile. So we really appreciate your support. And Rob, thanks again for being with us today, and best of luck. And let's stay connected. We've got a lot of things in common.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. You have a great day.
Thanks for joining us for another great episode of the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. To learn more about our mission and how you can support our vision of creating co-living communities worldwide, please visit us at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. To receive advanced viewings of our podcast and other exclusive content, find us on Patreon at patreon.com/Thrive Co-Living Communities. You can also learn more ways to support our mission in the show notes below. Amazon Smile, GoFundMe, Kroger, and our own Thrive Gear store, where you can buy t-shirts, hats, and many other items. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.